So what is the registry anyway? Well, the registry contains everything about your hardware, operating system, software, and your personal preferences. Data and information is split into 5 different root branches. To access the registry, simply go to Start, Run, and type in reg edit and press Enter. The first group starts with H key, and these are root branches, hives, or hive keys, which you cannot delete, rename, or move. I'm not going to go over too much as far as the registry hives or keys are concerned. If you need more information on this, please review the book. So let's break this down a little bit more. If you wanted to store information for somebody that is going to be running a macro, say unique values for their computer system, you would want to use keys for that. Many users of Windows don't actually know what the registry does. Well, the registry is very helpful because you can store unique values for that one computer based on the registry. This includes every time you run a macro to run differently based on what operating system they're running. You can store that in the registry. Or different variables that you want to store permanently, but they don't have to be encoded into the actual macro script. And there's two different hives that I'm going to be talking about. The first one is the local machine, and the second one is the current user. The current user allows you to specify settings just for the user that is currently logged into the computer, whereas the local machine affects any users on this machine that we're using. So if we go under current user, which we'll be using in this example, and we go under the software folder, you'll notice that you have quite a few different folders, classes, and then depending on which software you have installed, you'll have different folders. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to actually make a new folder in here, but we're going to do it based on the macro script instead of us manually doing it. So we'll leave the registry editor open and start Macro Express so that we can go into a little bit more detail on this. Alright, now that we're in Macro Express, let's go ahead and make a new macro script. So let's find a white area on our background here in the right task pane and hit New Macro. I'm going to choose No Activation for this example and click Scripting Editor. Next, what we need to do is under the commands in the left task pane, we want to click on Registry. Now we have quite a few different options here. I'm going to go ahead and start from the beginning and just go through all the different commands. If we use the Create Registry Key, it allows us to create one of these folders here. So what we need to do is we can browse first off and select a certain registry folder that we want, or hive, and select, say, current user and software. Next, click OK, and we can now specify more of a path. Say that we want to create a folder called Learn Macro Express, and then I click OK. Well, this will create a registry key for Macro Express, for Learn Macro Express. Now let's go ahead and press play, and you'll notice my macro runs very quickly. In fact, you can't really even see it run because there is only one command, so it's just going to go right into the registry editor. Let's go ahead and go in there, and under our software, you might have to press F5 on your keyboard to refresh. You'll see a folder now called Learn Macro Express, better known as a key in the registry editor. However, I usually look at these just as folders, but the technical term name is key. Alright, let's go ahead and continue with our next command. Let's go ahead and minimize this, and I'm going to open back up my Create Registry Key because I want this path name for my next command. So what I'm going to do is select the whole path and press Control-C for copy, and go ahead and press OK. It then gives us an error that says the registry key already exists. Creating this key will do nothing, which we know, so let's just click yes. We're going to leave it in there anyway in case it doesn't exist on a computer that we're using this macro for. So next we can use the delete registry key, and you probably guessed what it does. The path that we specify is going to delete that registry key. So if I press Control-V and paste in our existing registry key, and press OK, and then I run the software again, or the macro again, by pressing play. If I go into my registry editor and I press F5 on the software folder, you'll notice that my Learn Macro Express folder disappeared, and F5, keep in mind that that refreshes the list, is gone now because we deleted that registry key. That's quite a bit of information to take in. Let's take a breath here. Let's go on to our next command, the delete registry value. Let's go back to my example of different folders being on your hard drive. In the registry editor, there's kind of a setup of different folders. This is called a hive, this is called a key, and then you have values or files, if you were referring to the file system in Windows. And let's go into a subfolder here, for example, Insight Solutions, and say Macro Express. You have all these different values that Macro Express stores in the registry editor. Now the reason why they do that is because you can actually export all your settings for the registry editor or for a specific folder out of this registry the registry editor and put them onto another computer. So instead of you having to copy all your settings from one computer to another for specific programs that use the registry editor, you can just make a backup of that folder in your registry. So going back to my example of this being a file system on your computer, which it is, it just has different names, the backup folder contains a file called default with the type of regsc, which means it's a string file, and it stores no data because there's value not set. Now each folder is going to have one of these default files because it's pretty much a placeholder for that folder. So let me try that one more time because that wording is kind of confusing. The backup folder contains a file that is called default, which is a placeholder for each specific folder. So let's go into the bypass folder under the Macro Express folder. The bypass stores several files, or names, if you will, of these specific settings in the program, set in and set string. Now we know that these are regsc files, which are string files. So if we double click on it, we can edit the string value. So we can say, hello, how are you? I wouldn't recommend doing this because the program has specific settings in there that need to be set. For example, this has a 0, which could be probably either 0 or 1, and if it's something else, it might mess up the program. So if we press OK, now you'll notice that our data changed. What we're going to do is double click on this again and change it back to 0. And press OK. So all these different companies that have different software, and depending on your computer system, you might have a lot longer list. I'm going to click this negative sign to close that hierarchy tree up. You'll notice that I have probably about 8 folders there, but on your computer you might have 20 or 30 or 40 folders depending on how many applications you have installed. Okay, now that we've got the understanding of folders, I'm going to refer to these directories as their proper name, which is the main directories here, or the root directories, are called hives, and the subdirectories are all called keys. And the reason why I'm going back to the technical name rather than just keep calling these folders or this the folder root or something like that is because they all are called hives, and values and keys, and we need to refer to them as that because applications such as Macro Express refer to them as that. Microsoft does, and so will probably other people that you're discussing registry with, which probably won't be a very fun topic to discuss with most people, so might want to stay away from that one. Alright, let's go ahead and minimize the registry editor here and continue on with my read-write registry value. Now I double-clicked on the delete registry value, and that's why we get this window. Now you'll notice that my command does say delete registry value, but we actually can change this on the fly to something else if we wanted to. And I'll say this again, with Macro Express, a lot of the commands, although they're listed in one category, they could be listed several other times in other command categories. And also when you open a dialog to change a command, you might find it appeasing that there are other options that you can do so that you don't have to double click on each one of these commands every time that you want to add a new command. So let's go ahead and, well, actually let's wait on the delete registry value because we need to first create a registry value. So I have a few different options here. Write registry decimal, which will write in the registry decimal number. The write registry integer will enter only an integer number, and the write registry string will enter a text or number string into the registry. Now in this example, we're just going to focus on the write registry string. The other ones are used quite often, however, the string is the one that's used the most. So in order to use a string, we first have to have some type of value to put in our registry. So what information is the computer going to use when it writes a registry string file? I mean, is it going to say, okay, type in ABC, type in somebody's name, type in this long string of words? I mean, it doesn't know what it needs to type in to that value for the registry. So what we need to do is first specify a variable which acts as a container for information. So first on your list, locate variables and click variable set string. Now this will say, okay, set value now, prompt for value. So we have quite a few different options. Let's say we wanted to prompt the user to type something in, and then we're going to store this in the registry. We can do that with variables. Or if you want to set T1 with a random letter, or any type of thing, set value from environmental variable, and we wanted to get the computer system path or Windows path or temporary path. Those can all be accomplished with variables. So what we're going to do is first set the value now and modify its initial value and say, hello, how are you? Just for an example. You can change it to whatever you want. Next, let's go ahead and delete the registry key. And the reason why I'm doing that is because we don't want to delete something that we just created. We're going to create a registry key called Learn Macro Express, and we're going to store that hello, how are you in that key. Now one really nice ability of Macro Express is you don't actually have to specify that create registry key when you're writing a value of a string, because it will automatically create those keys for you as it goes along. So let me show you that right now, because this is a more effective way of creating macro script and using less lines of code. Let's go ahead and click on this create registry key and press delete. Now that we have the variable T1 set to hello, how are you, we need to do something with that variable. Since this example is about the registry, what we're going to do is scroll up to the commands and find the command category called registry. Then we are going to write a registry string. So double click on write registry string. Okay, so now we have the command write registry string, and that says use variable T1, or we could select a different variable if we wanted to. However, in this exercise we did already set the string T1 to hello, how are you, so we're going to use variable T1 in the write registry value. Next we have the path name, and let's go ahead and click browse so that we can locate where we want this in our registry. So once again we have a few different options. We could either use the HKey current user if we just wanted these settings per user, or if we wanted to do it for the entire computer. Say a setting of a window size will be 400 pixels, you might want to have that for the complete computer. In that case you would use something similar to local machine. The current user will allow you to specify settings directly for that user that's logged in. So right now on my computer I'm logged in as Matt. So the HKey current user doesn't actually say the current user's name, but in reference, we're really using hkey underscore mat. But it won't, of course, say that because it's just talking about the current user that's logged into the computer. So if we go under software, we have quite a few different folders, but the folder that we want to use is not actually listed there. So what we need to do is make a new folder. So right now it says browse registry. It says our path is currently hkey underscore current underscore user backslash software backslash, and that's it. If we press OK, we can actually type in more information than that. So if we want a subkey of software, we could type in learn macro express. And then let's say we want another subkey of learn macro express, say strings. And then if we put another backslash, then we can even get into more details, say string 1. And you kind of have to gauge how many subkeys that you want to have listed, because if your application really isn't that long, or your macro script really isn't that long, you probably want to have less keys than a long list or a long hierarchy of keys. Whereas if you're writing 2,000 lines of code, it's very important that you know where your path is and where those variables are going in the registry. Now very often, if you also want to reference back to this path name, you can copy it out, because sometimes you'll use multiple write registry strings or read registry strings all in one statement of your macro script. So I like to copy this and press Control-C to copy it after you select the whole path and press OK. The other thing is if you do have a really long macro, you might want to use the notes function in the Macro Express application, because this will store that path, or you could even write down, say, T1 is equal to hello, how are you, so that you really know what you're doing and what variables you've already used, just to reference back, because if you're using 50 or 60 variables, it can get quite confusing what's already being used and what's not being used. Now there isn't any user intervention in this macro, so if we press play, it doesn't actually look like it even runs. However, it does, and the way we can check this is if we go into the registry editor, you'll notice in my software class that it doesn't actually show that new folder learn macro express, and the reason why is because we need to update or refresh this list. So first off, you need to click on the software folder, or whichever subfolder this key is located in. So learn macro express is a subkey of software, and so we need to refresh this folder or key so that we can see any new keys added. So now that we've done that, we can see this key, which in this example is actually a subkey of software, but they don't necessarily always reference it as a subkey. They could just call it a key, but what they would say is learn macro express is a key of software, software is a key of hkey current user. So with the registry, there are quite a few different terms to learn: hives, keys, subkeys, and values. And the reason why I think Microsoft decided to go with this terminology is because they don't want to confuse people when they're going through the hard drive, when they say, oh yeah, in the registry there's a folder called learn macro express. That might confuse people, because they might think it's actually physically on the hard drive, when in reality there's just a file somewhere in the Windows operating system that contains these values for the registry. And every time that you start Windows, it calls upon that file and generates this registry that we can see. So there's two different ways to look at this learn macro express folder. It's a subkey of the software key, whereas if we expand the list of learn macro express, we have a folder called strings, and learn macro express is the key of the subkey strings. Well, that sounds kind of confusing, doesn't it? And this is just based upon where you're referencing your point at. If you're referencing from strings, learn macro express will be the key, whereas if you're referencing learn macro express, software will be the key. So it just kind of depends on where you're looking in your registry and what key you're looking at to determine what's a subkey and what's a key. Finally, we get to our value, the string 1, which is a type reg sz, which is a string, and the data is hello, how are you? So if we double click on this, we can notice our value data of hello, how are you? And that is how the write registry string function works. The last two write functions, write registry integer and write registry decimal, will just do the same thing as the write registry string, except for it will write the registry in an integer or a decimal. And with either of these choices, you cannot use letters, and with a decimal, you can actually use a full number and then a point, and then whatever decimal or remainder that you want. So if you wanted to have 55.05, you could accomplish this using a decimal, whereas the write registry integer could only handle 55. It can't have that 0.05 there. Next, we have the read registry string, read registry integer, and read registry decimal. These are pretty self-explanatory. What they allow you to do is recall these registry strings that you specified, or registry integers or decimals that you already specified. So if we decide to get rid of this write registry string, let's first copy out our path by double clicking on it, and you'll see the path here. Simply select the whole path and press the Control-C button, and let's press OK. Let's go ahead and delete this now. And the reason why I'm doing this is we have the registry editor, and it already contains a value for string 1. So we've already accomplished our goal with that write string. Now, if you wanted to have like a macro script that was just for a setup, like setting up your macro for automation, and you need variables from the user, you could actually set up a separate script that will maybe run one time and collect that information and then not run anymore, or actually delete itself from your macro file. So now let's go ahead and minimize this back down, and we're going to use the read registry string. So let's go ahead and double click on it. And our path is what we already copied out, so I'm going to press Control-B, and this just saves us a little bit of extra time clicking browse and locating the string file rather than just copying and pasting it in. So now we have the option of putting this into a specific variable that we would like. If we want to put whatever information or whatever data is in the string 1 into variable t1, we can accomplish this by selecting this specific variable. If you want to use t2 or t3, you simply select that variable and click OK. So what we have in our macro script so far is variable set string t1 to hello, how are you, and we're going to read the registry string. I'm going to double click on this from this location, get the data, and return it to variable t3. Alright, so now that we've got two variables, how do we actually see those variables happen? Because if we press play right now, you'll notice nothing really actually happens. It's not displaying any output. So what we need to do is go up into our commands and find the dialog and click on text, or double click on text box display. From here we can specify a box header if we want. So if we said, okay, let's display %t2 here, and let's also do it in the box content, %t2%, and then we could say something to the extent of, here is what was in the registry key, or something like that, and press OK. So if we click play, you'll notice that our information is not there. Well, why is that? It's because when we did our text box display, I said variable t2, and what I meant to do was %t3. So what we need to do is change each one of these to t3 so that it gets the correct string, because when we set this read registry string, it's set to variable t3. Let's go ahead and press OK and press play again. Now you'll notice that it says, hello, how are you? And that is the value, if we go back and note the registry editor, that is stored in this string. It says, hello, how are you? So that was transferred over using this read registry string command. Let's go ahead and press OK and in the macro. Let's go ahead and go back under the registry commands, and you'll notice a couple of others here. The if command, let's go ahead and double click, allows you to say if this registry value or if this registry key exists or does not exist, do the following. So if we said, okay, if this registry value does not exist, and then we've got to find a path, let's go ahead and press browse, HKey current user, software, and in this example, learn macro express. Let's go ahead and press OK. And let's type in a value. Let's say setup complete or something like that. So it says, okay, if the registry value setup complete does not exist, do the following things. Let's go ahead and press OK. So what I'm going to do next is, I know I have to have an end if for this if statement. This if registry has to know when to stop doing the commands in that if registry set. So in other words, let me make this a little more clear. Let's put an end if here, and let's put a text type that says hello. So with using the end if, actually you have to have it anyway for the macro script to work properly. Otherwise it will just abort right out and say you don't have an end if statement for this if registry statement. Is because if you want to continue the macro after this if statement, you can do so using that end if. So in this example, we're saying, okay, text box display %t3, which is pulling from our registry string, and once it does that, it's going to say, okay, if the registry value setup complete does not exist, do the following statement, which we have none, then end this if statement, and then after you do that, say text type hello. So since this value doesn't exist, let's use a text type display located under the command category dialogues. Before I do this, I want to go to options and select command insertion and say insert after highlighted command or insert before highlighted command. What this will do is it will say, okay, after this command is highlighted, if I double click on a command over here, it's going to enter it right afterward or right before, depending on which option I selected. I selected the right after, so it will put whatever I say in after that highlighted selection. So let's say I put a text box display in. Let's go ahead and double click on this. And we have the box header and the box content. What we're going to do is just type in the box content and say setup has not been completed. So in essence, it's saying, okay, text box display %t3, which is pulling from which is going to be reading from the registry string 1, and that says, okay, if the registry value setup complete does not exist, which it doesn't, then display this text box, then end this if statement, this if registry statement, and then do a text type hello. Now the text type hello we're not actually going to be able to see because it's going to try to type that in on my keyboard. So let's go ahead and press play and see what happens. It's doing the same thing again as in regards of my text box display %t3 saying hello, how are you, which is our data in the registry for the string 1, and that's saying here is the registry key, which we typed in manually into that text box display. Now if we press OK, it's then going to say setup has not been completed, which is this text box display in this if statement. And it's going to text type hello, which it can't do because there's no applications that can take input. See, if I'm in my macro script right now and I try typing in hello, it's not going to actually do anything because there's nothing for the keyboard to type that into. Whereas if I went to the notes and I typed in hello, you'll notice that the hello word appears. Let's go ahead and go back into the script. We have one other thing to cover in the registry. Let's go ahead and go back into the registry commands category. And we have the delete registry key or delete registry value. The delete registry key will get rid of this key or folder, whereas the value will get rid of this string 1, hello, how are you, if that's what we specify for it to delete. And one of the most confusing parts of the registry that I see is a value is actually referring to this name and this data. This name and this data represent a value in the registry. The best way that I can correlate the two together is when you think of a file, it has both a name and it has data in that file. So a value contains a name and data. It also contains a type, which is referring to what type of data I'm going to find. And that corresponds with an extension of a file. Say if we have a .exe file, well, the type of this value is going to be reg_sz, which means string. And this concludes the registry video. Thanks for watching.